very unfair to our country and to the millions of people that voted really for us. They voted for us.
Well, let's return now to the diplomatic fallout between the UK and Russia over the naming of two suspects thought to have carried out the Salisbury nerve agent attack. The Prime Minister has said the two men were agents of the Russian Military Intelligence Agency, the GRU, but Russia has described the British version of events as absurd and accused Theresa May of living in an information vacuum. Well, to talk more about the diplomatic consequences of this row, let's bring in Tara McCormack. She's a lecturer in international politics at the University of Leicester. Tara, what's your take on all of this? Because, you know, the UK comes out, blames Russia for what happened in Salisbury. It sort of garners not unanimous, but pretty broad support from international allies. And Russia just says, you're crazy.
Well, I think I would say the first thing is that we have two suspects, but I would argue that the case hasn't materially advanced in that from the very beginning, our government stated this was definitely the Russians and it was a high-level assassination attempt, etc. Now, we have two suspects. Both men, it appears, travelled, it's pretty widely accepted, travelled under aliases. We don't have direct evidence that they are responsible for the assassination. We also don't have any evidence that these two men are part of the Russian secret services. Now, they absolutely may be, but we do not, so far our government has not made that case. And I do think it is slightly peculiar in that I'm presuming both the British government and the Russian government must actually know who these men are. I'd just like to point out that Russians, to travel to Britain, must have visas. So Russians cannot simply turn up. These are official Russian passports. There must have been a visa application, so both the Russian side will know of this, and also the British side, who will have granted these visas, will know. So at the moment, it seems to me the situation is still very unclear as to...
So you think Theresa May has gone too far with her accusations?
Well, her statement, and these are statements that she made almost from the very start of the attempted murder of Skripal and his daughter. Theresa May has basically asserted the same thing, that, you know, this was a high-level assassination. But that has not been proven. And yes, I think we do actually need evidence if we are going to make accusations such as this.
What about the assumption that if this was the GRU was acting under the orders of the Kremlin, and therefore that traces back directly to Putin? Is that fair, or is that also off the mark?
Well, no, I think the first thing is, and we don't have any evidence of who these two men were. So I think we should do less speculating and actually much more critical kind of holding the government to account. Because frankly, I'm not very interested in what the Russian government says, but what I am interested in as a British citizen is what the British government does and how it acts. And there is a sort of dearth of holding the government to account when it comes to many aspects of foreign policy. And I think we really see this. We should be scrutinising the government, we should be asking the government what's going on, we should be demanding evidence. And that is something that I see kind of seriously lacking.
But isn't there a general consensus, though, that there is a problem because Russia believes that it can act with impunity, whether or not you believe in their involvement in what happened in Salisbury? But we've also got MH17 meddling in the US election, reports of Russian meddling in the Brexit referendum as well. Russia thinks it can do what it wants, and the international community is not going to retaliate in a way that hurts.
No, I'm sorry. We have seen well over a year of investigations in the US to attempt to prove that it was, Russia that swung the vote for Trump. And it has come to nothing. And frankly, the argument, now whether one supports Brexit or thinks it's the worst thing to happen to Britain or the best thing, the idea that, 52% of people in Britain voted to leave the European Union hate it or like that, or like it, was because of Russia, is frankly one of the biggest evasions of kind of political responsibility in recent history.
So would you say there's almost a conspiracy of Russophobia?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a conspiracy, but I think that what we see in broader issues such as Brexit, the Trump vote, is that many kind of people in the political elites and the media are so horrified by what has happened that it is much easier to blame, you know, bad old Putin, and I have nothing nice to say about the Russian state, but it's much easier to blame Russia than actually to engage with our own societies. And I think actually that is the most fundamental threat actually to kind of our democracy. Absolutely not Russia, which spends, you know, I think sort of a fraction of money on weapons and so on compared to NATO, for example. You know, we need to, if we want to understand Brexit, if we want to understand Trump, we need to look at ourselves. We need to engage with our own societies. It's got very little to do with Russia, but that is a different. So I think that is one of the problems, really, that we have this kind of almost miasma of, you know, well, everything bad that happens must be to do with Russia. Now,
all right. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time. We have to leave it there, but good to get your thoughts on Sky News. Tara McCormack, thank you.
Thank you.